Dear Diary, yeah. Diary full of shit. Just play, wait, do over. Hey, Kaydee-Bug. Hey, girl. I'll be you. Hey, Boo. Future wife. Yeah. I mean, in theory. I just watched the movie Fear with Mark Wahlberg and Reese Witherspoon because I had mentioned it the other day. Boy, that was nostalgic. The warm fuzzies. Ooh. I like watching them old movies, because not only is it a different time, a different style of just movie, there's no hidden message or anything. The cars are different, but I remember it's nostalgic because I remember when and where, I saw it and that point in my life and, you know, where my minds was at and all that. And everybody's so young and shit, and god damn. I mean, Reese Witherspoon, you think she was really 16 in that movie? She looked like a kid. So, oh boy. Oh, pardon the yawns. But this scene where the guy's all, I'm here to see a man about a dog or something. And he walks up and he's in David's room, played by Mark Wahlberg. That mirror that's shaped like a diamond that has the middle, has like it's sectioned out in horizontal or vertical sections, and the middle is protruding out the most, and then it tapers down. My grandparents had that exact mirror when I was a kid. I don't remember when they got rid of it, if they gave it to a friend or family member, if it broke, if they threw it away, but I remember that seeing that as a kid. Like I didn't remember that scene, but when I saw that again, how the brain works, it just oh yeah that pulls it up, and when I first saw that movie, recognizing that mirror, like now, I don't know if my grandparents still had that mirror at that time when I saw that movie. Um, but I remember thinking, shit, my grandparents got that same mirror. It's a small world, and thinking nothing of it. It's like like meh, you know. But now that I'm old as fuck, it's like, huh. Wonder how many mirrors like that were in circulation, or possibly still are in circulation, hanging on someone's wall. So when I say circulation, that's the wrong word, but they were manufactured and then shipped, to a store, and somebody bought it and took it home and added it to their house, to really tie the room together or whatever. Um, you know, that movie was made in Hollywood. It's based, well, I'm assuming it was made in Hollywood. Maybe they traveled up there to Seattle, Washington State. So that's where it was based because of the Space Needle, Pacific Northwest, all that shit. And yeah, I completely forgot about that, you know. And Kaydee-Bug, I have that. I've showed it before. That modern art that I got hanging on the wall, that was also my grandparents. The one where it looks kind of like the Graboid, which I watched that movie 2 weeks ago or so, a week ago, whenever. Tremors 1. I've only seen 1 and 2. I'm not going to watch the rest. I just have no desire. I'll watch Tremors 2 again, maybe this weekend, maybe not. and you know, so I showed you that, and you also have a modern art picture that kind of looks the same. It kind of flows, you know, the same. You know, modern art, right? It's just like shit. Now, apparently, a relative painted this. I don't know how I would be related to him, but you know, he's, you know, family in some way, shape, or form. You know, and I just have it for nostalgic reasons. I have a bunch of pictures. Well, actually, every single picture in my house is nostalgic. I have nothing that I picked out myself. Like the keychain, you know, I remember that. Everything. This is not really my style. You know what I mean? Like I've got a picture that have horses on it. Technically, it would be in the kitchen. And I remember that hanging in the trailer. It was an old school trailer, you know, that you live in on the ranch, several thousand acre cattle ranch that my uncle, not related to me by blood, I had an uncle, well, still do, he's just old as shit now, who had a ranch in fucking Wyoming, blah, blah, blah. I've talked about that. I was related to him by blood, but the other one that I hung around with, blah, 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 blah. All that shit, you know. I was driving a 5-speed, you know, stick shift Datsun when I was like 10 years old. You know, seat all the way forward. Didn't have to sit on anything. I could see over the dash, but I couldn't reach the pedals. So I had coats and shit stuffed behind me. And he had a dog, a blue heeler. And he was explaining to me, you know, gas first, then let the clutch out, then, you know, stop a little bit, let it slip, then give it a little bit more gas, then let the clutch out. You're going to roll back. You just kind of want to get this nice, easy. You're going to roll, go through the clutch out, the gas, clutch out, slip, more gas, let it out, nice, smooth. Then you go forward, and then you're off to the races, and you're just grabbing gears. And this guy looked over, and he was talking to me, and he looked over and realized, you know, the situation, because clearly I'm like, you know, a kid, right? Elementary school. And he's all, they got to learn sometime. And the guy just sort of nodded like, right. And he's all, that's a good looking dog. So, anyway, and he also had a big old monster truck. It was even bigger and more jacked up than the one I got, if I remember correctly. It was an automatic. I'd drive that around. God damn, you know. But anyway, just drove, you know, just all that shit that I've talked about before. So, yeah, never came of age, you know, but I was old enough, you know, 10, 11, 12, 13-ish, you know. Got a toehold, you know, got my foot in the door, you know, when it came to that world, you know. Could ride a horse pretty damn good. Was learning to rope, could ride good, you know, pretty damn good. Would do dry runs, you know, in the evening, you know. Because those horses, you know, when they go, you know. So, I mean, I was a little buckaroo, but I could ride a goddamn horse. You know, and then I'd stand up and go through the motions like I was throwing the rope, but I was learning to cut cows and all that stuff, and yeah, that was real ranch work, you know, and I'm glad that I was a part of that. And like I said, he would send me off to, you know, herd cows, move them to a different pasture. He'd go do his own thing. And blah, 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 follow the fence line, we'll meet here, blah, blah, blah. If I got lost, he'd come find me, and we'd go back to the trailer, eat dinner, you know, in bed by like 8 o'clock. We'd get up at like, you know, 4:30 every morning, eat breakfast, go saddle the horses, and just and we do different shit. Sometimes like we'd see a fence that needed fixed, so the next day we'd go get load up the shit, in the pick 'em up truck and go out there and fix the fence and just ranch work, real ranch work. But his paycheck came from the guy who owned the ranch. So, but anyway, and my aunt worked at a Western store. So, but and same thing with my other uncle. Their money came from the cows, the ranch. She was a teacher. She could also do the cowboy thing, but mostly that's what he did during the day. Cowboy hat, sunglasses, always had a toothpick in the corner of his mouth, soft-spoken, all that stuff. Was a professional bull rider. I always got to throw that out there. Cowboy shit! I've talked about that shit before, I think like, yeah, it was up there. I was joking, helping herding the cows, and the one was like, it was in the pen, and it went to jump over me. And I grabbed it in midair and like slammed it up against the wall, and they're freaking out, and all that. And it turns out the other ranchers would go out there, and it's easier to do it out in the field, the pasture. And but anyway, I say this because, oh shit, now I'm going down this rabbit trail. They would kick, they would hurt, and his advice was, you got to stay close. That way, it's like a kick from a long distance or a kick from a short distance. So I kind of joked, cowboy logic, it's either going to hurt a little or it's going to hurt a lot. Or it's either going to hurt a lot or it's going to hurt a little. It's up to you. So, and same thing with my other uncle. We'd be out there, doctoring cows, after calving season. There's always a couple that, are kind of fucked up. So you got to go give them some shots, ram some pills down their throat and stuff out there in the field because it's a working ranch, right? It's easier just to, you saddle up the horse, you go take care of that. Oh, you make a note of her. Okay, here's the calf. It's all weird and shit. So you go that blah blah blah, ranch shit. And the horses, he'd rope them, and they were trained to, stand there, and he could do that, and they'd keep the slack off the rope. But he decided to allocate that job to me, where he would rope, and I would, jump off my horse and run and knock the calf over and hold it. And I remember there was some sort of technique that I don't remember right, to grab its hoof and kick my little cowboy boot out, with my spur, and hold it. And whatever the technique was, I don't remember, but, he's telling me this, that, and the other. They will draw blood. They know what's going on. You really got to hit them hard. And I hit that calf so hard, I think I almost knocked it out because it was very, very complacent. And then when I let it up, it just sort of like hobbled away, like, woo, fuck. And I don't remember. That's the only, if we did more, or I honestly don't remember. You'd think I would, but yeah, they used to rig stuff up. They rigged a calf pen to like the front of a pickup truck. It was like something out of a movie, But yeah. And he could cowboy. For all of his screw-ups, he could break a horse real well. And all the other ranch hands, there were originally 3, and he let them all go because he could do the work of literally 3 men. So, scrawny little dude, But, anyway, I digress. What was I talking about? Oh yeah, out there, so I'm out there by myself, right? I got my canteen, and I'm just completely alone. Just me and the cows, horizon after horizon, just more hills and weeds. And I stopped and I tipped the canteen up, and I heard one of them bugs, that kind of sounded like a rattlesnake, And it, I don't know. I kind of compare things to movies, but I remember that. As a kid, I'm like, 11, 12 years old, whatever, right? Kind of at like a pivotal age, puberty and all that shit. And I just remember feeling very, like, peaceful, like, I like this, and I don't remember how I felt at the time, if I lived outside myself like I do now, but thinking back, most people, you know, kids that age would probably be kind of like starting to panic a little bit, like, am I gonna die out here? You know, the sun's gonna be down in 4 hours, you know. But I was just totally cool. That was nice. Well, he said, you know, blah, 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 follow the fence line, you know. I'm sure he could find me, you know, but it is one of those things, you know, worst case scenario, you know, shit. You fall off your horse, break your leg, get bit by a snake. I mean, shit could happen, you know. But get drugged by your horse, get caught in a stirrup, you know. You know, internal hemorrhaging, you know, just beat up too bad, you know. Shit could go south. You know, and the horse would just be booking it for the house, you know. They weren't that well trained. Because at the end of the day, they knew their way back. So that would be another thing too. If you get lost, just let the horse, and they'd start to like, I forget what it's called, a canter or whatever. They wouldn't outright run, but they would like, you know, a trot or whatever. God damn, I remember that too. Sometimes we would run on the horses. A lot of times it was the, you know. But sometimes it was just a flat out run. I could ride a fucking horse. I really could. So, little buckaroo, can you picture it, Kaydee-Boo? I'm 12 fucking years old. I'm a little kid out there on the, you know, shit. Sidestep, you know, I could make them, you know. I mean, it takes a well-trained horse to do that. And then there's like, if they kind of get a little anxious, you know, you don't want to get too crazy with them because they're responding to your, you know, what you're doing, pulling back on the bridle and your boots and, you know, all that stuff. So you can, if you're not like an experienced rider, you know, you kind of just have to calmly let them know that you're telling them to do stuff, but ultimately they don't really have to. But you can cut them off, you know, if they want to do something, like if they want to rear up, you know, you pull the rein in and gently yet assertively kind of pull their head in towards you. And then they just sort of, and then they'll spin around in a circle, and then you release a little bit, you know, and they'll fight you, you know, and just relax with your feet. Don't be squeezing, you know, and keep your heels out. Don't be digging with your toes, you know, or anything like that, because they, you know, I remember all that stuff. And, you know, they were trained horses, but they were still ranch horses, so they had spirit, you know what I mean? So, like I said, the horse that I rode when I was doing the dry runs, learning to rope, you know, so they'd bust open the gate and the calf would run, and the horse would just boom, just bolt off like a lightning bolt, and you know, flat out run. And I remember I'd stand up, you know, and go like I'd throw my hand out, but I didn't have no rope, right? And when I did that, the horse, you know, sensed when my weight shifted, and it would give a single rear leg buck, just like exuberance, you know, excitement, yeehaw. And those are the types of horses that they were. You know, they'd come in, you know, they'd be like, you know, all excited and stuff, you know. And so they were trained, but they were still full of piss and vinegar. I guess that's all I gotta say. Baby, hey. So it must be some sort of fate, you know, because of the picture. I mean, what else could it be? Kaydee-Boo, what else could it possibly be? Me and you, girl. It's too bad I'm a troll and I don't do shit like that. Because, you know,